Hello everybody, today we're going to be looking at lists and looping or iterating over them in Vue.js, and to do that we're going to be looking at the classic to-do list example. If you've done any JavaScript before, you're probably quite familiar with to-do lists because they're a really good way of introducing core concepts. So as you can see here, I've got JS Fiddle open and I've already imported my Bootstrap CSS. That's just to make things neater for the video. You don't need to do that. And we're going to start by importing Vue, and JS Fiddle already knows where to go and get that. Select that. And we want to start by creating our new Vue instance. So new Vue, and then we put in our options object. And the first thing we need to tell it is where to mount the Vue instance. So we're going to mount it to an element called app. And so let's go and create that element. ID equals app, like so. Next up, we want to add our to-dos list, and that's obviously going to be an array, and that goes inside our data function, and data returns an object. Hopefully you remember that from the last video. And then here's our to-dos array, which goes inside our data function. Let's just tidy that up a little bit. So we've set that up. It's just an empty array. It's not doing anything at the minute. But the first thing we're going to want to do is to be able to add something to this list. And to do that, we're going to need to set up a little form. So let's start by creating an input box. Input type equals text. And we want to add our Bootstrap classes. So form control, adding our margin at the bottom, and placeholder equals add task to do, like so. And if we just run that, you'll see we've got our input box up. We're also going to want a button so that we can actually add something to our lists when we click it. So let's do button. Once again, we'll add our Bootstrap classes, and we're just going to put add task on our button, retidy that back up and run that. And as you can see, we've got our little form set up. One of the good things about Vue is that you can actually output an array onto the actual web page. So we just put a little heading up here called raw output. And if you remember, if you use these moustaches, Vue interprets it as JavaScript. And so if we put to-dos, that references our to-dos variable here, and click run, you can see that we've got our let's just put the margin in properly. You can see that we've got our array being output onto the screen. And just to prove that, if I type foo into there we go. As you can see, that's reflected on our screen. So it's a nice easy way to see that everything we're doing is working before we actually look at actually iterating or looping over the list. Right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is track what's being typed into this box. If you remember from the last video, we used something called vModel, which created a two-way binding, and so we need to have a variable to bind our input box to, and we're going to call that variable task. We'll just pop that under the to-dos array, and that will just be empty. And if we come over to our input element, we just put vModel equals and then task. So now anything we type into this box will automatically update task inside our Vue instance. And obviously that's vice versa as well. So if we update task inside our Vue instance, it will actually update it into the box. Now we need to create an event that when we click this, so when we click this button, it calls a method which adds the value of our input box into our to-dos array. To do that, we're going to have to create a method. So we're going to put our methods attribute, and then we're going to create add task method, like so. And the easiest way to add a task is to use push, which is just a standard JavaScript function. And so we put this dot to-dos, we're referencing to-dos here, dot push, and we're going to want to push our own object onto it. And so we're going to have a property called task, and that is going to be the value of our task input box, or our task variable down here. And then we're just going to want to know whether or not that task is complete. And obviously when we add it, it is not. And as for a little bit of tidying up, when we add a task, we can do this dot task equals nothing, and that will clear out our box. So that's the two-way binding in action there. If I just run that, you won't see any difference yet because we've not actually added added the event onto our button. So if we come over to our button here, and then we can use v on click. So we're saying when we click this button, add task. And if I run that, let's add a task, and our first task will be get dressed. And don't worry, I am dressed. If you're thinking I'm not, I've already done that today. And as you can see there, that has added that object into our to-dos list array, which is fantastic. Next up then, we actually want to be able to output this not just as an array, but we want to output it in a way that we can interact with it. So in order to do that, we can create a list, and we're going to use an ordered list, OL, and then li list item, and then Vue has something called v4, and most things in Vue have v put before them. So v4 is a for loop, v model is what we're using over here for our two-way binding, v on is for our events, and so for looping we use v4. And then we say v4 to do in to-dos. So we're basically saying for every to-do in our to-dos array, create a new list item. And we can use this to-do to access each individual object that we've added. So if I come here and I want to print this out, we put to-do dot task, like so, and then let's run that, sorry, and then let's re-add get dressed, click add task, and as you can see, that's come out in our list, and you can also see the raw output down here. Another thing that we might want to be able to do is check things off of our to-do list. We've already got this complete property here, and so we can now add a checkbox. So we put input type equals checkbox, and we can use vModel to actually bind to the individual object's property. So vModel, and we can put to-do dot complete, like so. And if I run that again and I type in get dressed and add the task, try that again. I'm a bit ahead of JS Fiddle here. If I click get dressed, you'll see that inside the raw output here, that the values change when I check and uncheck the box. And to prove that that would happen for everything, we'll put create YouTube video, add that task, and as you can see, they're individually checked, so it doesn't check all of them. Now, one thing that would be much better is not just checking them, but to actually show or display somehow that these have actually been checked off of our list. And so we can use a conditional, and to do that, we can use something called v-if, unsurprisingly it starts with a v, and so we can put that onto a span tag, span v-if, and then we want to say v-if to do dot complete. So if we've completed this task, we're going to use the HTML5 del tag, which I think is short for delete, and so it will strike through that for us. And then we can put to do dot task, and then under here we can use a v else, otherwise just show the task that we've set and don't strike it through. And let's just tidy that all back up, and we'll click run. And so now if I put in get dressed, add task, you'll see that it's striking it through as I check them off. Oops. Get dressed and add or create YouTube video, add task, and then you can see that as we check them, it knows what ones to strike through. Now, finally, you might have just noticed that I've managed to add an empty to do. Now, that's not really very good. So an easy way to go about stopping that would be to disable this add task button whenever we haven't got any value inside our task input area. And to do that, we can use vbind. We've not spoken about vbind yet, and we'll probably do that in a later video, but it's nice and easy. You simply can put a vbind on the HTML attribute which is disabled on our button. So we put vbind disabled equals, and then we can put a conditional in here. So not task. So when task is empty, disable our button. And if I run that, you'll see that I can't click that now, but as soon as I type something in, get dressed, our task is added, which is excellent. And so I think that's everything for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did like it, put a like on the video. And if you're enjoying these videos, then please subscribe to the channel. I'm going to keep uploading stuff about Vue, and I might even go into some other kind of back-end technologies such as Laravel in future. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and that's it for today. Thanks.